So this is my first mock draft in a couple weeks. I've been into March Madness these last couple weeks, and since the Final Four is on Saturday, I figured that there would be some time for a Thursday night mock draft. So I know there's a lot of catching up to do because a couple things have happened. Maybe some interests in several teams have changed within the last couple weeks. But my plan is to have maybe at least 2 or 3 more mock drafts before the NFL draft begins. And I'm thinking that last one, it may be possibly the Monday night before the draft, or maybe the night before. That way it's about 24 hours to kind of process it before draft night, but I will cross that bridge when I come to it. So far, this is my 6.0. So my 6th mock draft of the NFL draft season. And we are less than a month away. In fact, we are in NFL draft month. So it's coming pretty fast. Now, 5.0, I know that I made a sarcastic comment saying that I plan to make 5.0 a dumb mock draft. That wasn't really my intention. And it turned out that it was a pretty popular mock draft. And I'm hoping 6.0 is a lot better than 5.0. And I think 6.0 I can explain a lot of it better than I did in 5.0. So without further ado, let's get to 6.0. With the first overall pick, I have the Arizona Cardinals going with Nick Bosa, defensive end of Ohio State. Now, I've probably said this in the last maybe 2 or 3 mock drafts. The Cardinals, they seem interested in trading away Josh Rosen. But there are 2 things. 1, there was a comment in my 5.0, my 4.0, but I think it was my 5.0, where it wouldn't make sense for the Cardinals to trade Josh Rosen because it damages a rookie quarterback's psyche. And I apologize that I can't remember who it was that commented that. But I'll mention it in 7.0 next week. But until I see Josh Rosen, until the news story actually becomes a legitimate news story, as soon as I see that Josh Rosen is no longer on the Cardinals roster, Nick Bosa is the pick. I don't care about any teams that are interested, that teams are throwing in a 3rd round pick or a 2nd round pick, or they have interests. Well, everybody has interests of their own as well. Not just in athletics, but just in real life in general. So until I see the breaking news saying that Josh Rosen has been traded, Nick Bosa is going to be the pick. I won't believe that the Cardinals will draft Kyler Murray until they actually draft Kyler Murray. With the 2nd overall pick, I have the San Francisco 49ers going with Josh Allen, defensive end linebacker out of Kentucky. Now, Josh Allen is probably my favorite prospect because he's a little bit of what I root for in a prospect. He's not from one of those blue blood schools like Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State or even Michigan, but he stayed all 4 years in college. And I respect the 4-year players more than the 3-year players. In fact, when we get to NBA mock draft time, and I only did 1 NBA mock draft last season, I'm hoping to do at least maybe 3 or 4 this year for NBA, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I say all the time in my NBA mock drafts that I respect the players that stay for about 3 or 4 years. I don't respect the one and dones. Well, I respect some of them, but I don't respect all of them. I respect the players that stay for 3, 4 years to work on their game instead of the one and dones that just take 1 year of college for granted and hope to make millions of dollars. And Josh Allen is one of those people that I respect. because he stayed all 4 years at a school that's really not necessarily competitive in football, but Kentucky had a solid season this past year. And Josh Allen led the Kentucky team. He was a leader on that squad. And I think he'll be a leader in the 49ers. And we know that John Lynch is a defensive guy. So I think this is the pick for John Lynch. Number 3, I have the New York Jets going with Jawan Taylor, offensive tackle out of Florida. Now, this is the pick that I called in my 5.0, I believe, as kind of like the logistical pick. Because the Jets, they had acquired Le'Veon Bell in free agency, and a logical thing to do is to start off with getting an offensive lineman to build holes in the running game, protect your young quarterback in Sam Darnold, and hey, the Jets jerseys this season, their uniforms, they look fire. I'm probably a part of the minority that says that they look fire. Even though I think the Jets are going to finish maybe 4-12, 5-11, their jerseys still look fire though. Number 4, I have the Oakland Raiders going with Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle out of Alabama. And this is another logistical pick as well. Just finding your replacement for Khalil Mack. And I think Quinnen Williams is the best player available among defensive players. And he's been talked about as potentially number 1 pick if it weren't for Nick Bosa. And I can see it. Although I don't want to come to an assumption that Alabama players are automatically NFL ready just because they're like an NFL defense. You got to understand that not all of the good prospects that come from good teams are going to pan out so well in the National Football League. Alabama's strength is defense. And Nick Saban, he has experience with NFL defenses because he was the coach of the Miami Dolphins. But defense is his strength. Offense is not. And I think Quinnen Williams, he's either going to be really good or he's going to be a bust. And he will end up being an AAF player. Oh yeah, that's right. They shut down their operations. Number 5, I had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going with Montez Sweat, defensive end of Mississippi State. Now Montez Sweat is a very interesting prospect. He was originally slated, once we started this process, as a mid-first round pick. I think the lowest I've ever had Montez Sweat is probably in the late teens, like 16 or 17 or 18. But Montez Sweat, after the combine, he seemed to move up to a top 5 pick in a lot of my mock drafts, maybe a lot of other mock drafts as well. But there's no way that I see Montez Sweat falling outside of the top 10 on draft night. I'll be very shocked if Montez Sweat is still available when the Atlanta Falcons are on the clock at 14. I'll be stunned. Now Montez Sweat, I think if he was on the Tampa Bay team, because Tampa Bay did draft Vita Vea last season in the NFL draft. And I think you want to stack up your defense a little bit if you're in the NFC South. Because I think the NFL, not only that, but I think the NFL is becoming all about offense. You need a lot of defensive talent to stop these explosive offenses. And we've seen in the past, especially in the NFC South, with explosive offenses. We saw the Saints just this past season, for quite some time now. And the Falcons, they had an outlier season on offense. Although the offense for the Falcons is still good, it just isn't showed that much because the Falcons, they aren't as successful on offense as they were in the quote-unquote outlier season. And we saw the Panthers. Cam Newton had an MVP type season. He had an MVP season in 2015. And the Panthers, their offense, it's still pretty solid, but it doesn't. All of the offenses, the Saints, Panthers, Falcons, they're all good offenses. They just don't get shown that much. At least the Panthers and Falcons offenses aren't shown because their teams, those teams don't win as much. Like they don't win like they did in the quote-unquote outlier seasons that the Panthers and the Falcons had. So you got to stack up on defense if you're Tampa Bay, because you're the bottom feeder of the NFC South. Stack up your defense, because Bruce Arians, I think he can. This is Jameis Winston's last chance in Tampa Bay. I think you give Bruce Arians this season to try to improve Jameis Winston's game. As much as I think maybe it's time to move on from Jameis Winston, give him one season with Bruce Arians and see where it goes. Pick number 6, I had the New York Giants going with Dwayne Haskins, quarterback out of Ohio State. Now, there was some video that someone tried to upload, a Giants fan, that said that the Giants traded for Josh Rosen. And this was on Monday, which of course I wasn't even going to fall for, because really I don't do videos on anything on April 1st because nobody takes anything seriously that day anyway. So I try to avoid that. And like I said, until the Giants actually trade for a quarterback, I still think they're going with Dwayne Haskins no matter what. So I think this is one of the rare picks in my mock draft that's been set in stone. In fact, there's been a couple picks that I felt like have been set in stone for a long time. Like Bosa, number 1, has been set in stone for me. Josh Allen, number 2, has been set in stone for me for the last couple mock drafts. Juwan Taylor at 3 is kind of like a lock for me. And Haskins at number 6, the Giants, that's a lock. So there's at least 4 locks for me in the top 10. Because the Giants, they got to replace Eli Manning. And draft Haskins, let him start his season. Well, let him learn under Eli for one more season. Then cut him loose in 2020. That's kind of the plan for the Giants. And the Giants did trade Odell Beckham a couple weeks ago. Well, about maybe a month ago. It was quite some time ago. It's almost like old news at this point. But the Giants, as much as they need receivers, you can invest in wide receivers in later rounds. In fact, the Giants, they have needs of their own. And you got to really invest. You got to draft smart if you want to compete for championships every season, which the Giants, they have failed to do ever since winning those 2 Super Bowls, which they have completely imploded ever since that. And the Giants, they got to compete again, and you got to find your quarterback of the future. Number 7, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars with Jonah Williams, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Now, this is probably a surprise pick to a lot of people, but there's logic behind it. The Jaguars signed Nick Foles to a 4-year, $88 million deal. What do you do after that? You find the best offensive tackle available and protect him. Protect the $88 million. Make the $88 million worth it. Go with the logical pick, Jacksonville. Because I think that Jacksonville, they would consider going with Metcalf, but I feel like it could be a little too early. I know that DK Metcalf to me has looked impressive. I think he's the best wide receiver. I think him, Harry, I feel like those are the 2 receivers that are sticking out to me right now. But I think Jacksonville, if they wanted to go with DK Metcalf, I think it's a little too early though. It's kind of confusing because I feel like this is going to be a defensive heavy top 10. With the exception of the Giants going with a defensive player or offensive. Maybe the Jets could trade down from 3 to 6, possibly. But I see this being a defensive heavy draft because, like I've been saying, the NFL is it's becoming all about explosive offenses. So I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, if they go with DK Metcalf, they might trade down. If somebody trades with Jacksonville and they move up to draft somebody, I expect if DK Metcalf is still there, possibly at maybe 12, 13, or 14, I expect Jacksonville to draft DK Metcalf, get Nick Foles at target. Because I addressed that a few mock drafts ago, that if Quinn Williams is still available at number 7, I think the Jaguars go with him. But it could be possible they would want DK Metcalf as well. I think there's a couple teams that want DK Metcalf, and I think it might be a race for him as well. Like, I think Buffalo might be in that race. I think possibly the Dolphins could be in that race. I think the Packers can be at that race. So I was going to wait for this till the end, but right now this is sticking out to me. I see this being a race between Jacksonville, Buffalo, possibly Denver, maybe not, so I'll put them on the side. Green Bay, Miami, Washington. There could be 5 or 6 teams arguing and battling for DK Metcalf. But the question is, are there... I'll be honest though, I think this wide receiver class is stacked, and I don't care what anybody says otherwise. I think this wide receiver group is a stacked group of wide receivers. And there may be 5 or 6 teams that want DK Metcalf, but I think maybe at least 2 or 3 of them are going to be smart and take your top priority and then invest in one in the second round. So I think Jacksonville goes with Jonah Williams, but I think there's still a 5% chance that they go DK Metcalf. Number 8, I have the Detroit Lions going with Greedy Williams, cornerback out of LSU. I just think this would be kind of a decent fit. There was a comment in one of my videos, well, in the mock draft video, I think it was 4.0, or it was the last one of those two. And the commenter was going on a list of teams that would, or a list of players that would be a perfect fit, or they would look good in the jersey. And Greedy Williams was, of course, selected for Detroit. And that kind of inspired me, because I think Detroit, they need some help throughout the defensive side. But I think secondary is the way to go. Considering that when you play the Vikings twice a year, covering Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, and you're playing the Bears, and the Bears are on the rise, and the Packers, I think they're going to get back to form. The Lions, they got to regroup. They're still rebuilding, in my opinion. Even though they've had a couple of outlier playoff appearances, they are still the bottom feeder in the NFC North. Number 9, I have the Buffalo Bills going with Ed Oliver, defensive tackle out of Houston. And I've talked about this one for a couple mock drafts, that this is your Kyle Williams replacement. You got to replace what was a leader on a bad Buffalo Bills team. Number 10, I have the Denver Broncos going with Drew Lock, the quarterback out of Missouri. And this really isn't an ideal pick. But Joe Flacco may end up getting benched at some point for the Broncos next season. And I just don't see Joe Flacco panning out in Denver whatsoever. So you might want to just start young. Although I think the Broncos, they may bail on Drew Lock and wait for Justin Herbert next season, because the Broncos, I think, have expressed interest in Justin Herbert last season when they found out he returned to school at Oregon for his senior season. I think the Broncos, they kind of bailed. Number 11, I have the Cincinnati Bengals going with Devin White, linebacker out of LSU. The Bengals, they just need some help on a lot of areas. With the Browns making smart moves and getting new, fresh talent, the Bengals are now the bottom feeders of the AFC North. And the Bengals, they need to regroup fast, or the Bengals will become the next Cleveland Browns. And why not start off with getting Devin White, someone that's going to be a good fit for your system, the best linebacker in this draft class. Devin White, you can't let him get any further than outside the top 10. So the Bengals, they need to pounce and get a good prospect in Devin White. Number 12, I have the Green Bay Packers with T.J. Hawkinson, tight end of Iowa. Now this is probably a strange pick to a lot of people as well, with the Packers having Jimmy Graham. But I don't know if Jimmy Graham's going to be there in the near future. And even if he is, Jimmy Graham is pushing on 32 years old. And we just saw Rob Gronkowski retire at 29. And yes, I know Rob Gronkowski he was injury prone. But Jimmy Graham, he hasn't really performed as what a lot of people are expecting. Yes, he has a decent amount of catches, but he hasn't found the end zone that many times ever since he left the Saints. He just hasn't been in the end zone as much. He hasn't been as big of a threat as he was back in New Orleans. And I think the Packers, they should draft a backup tight end, and we'll see what happens with Jimmy Graham. But adding T.J. Hawkinson is going to add red zone opportunities for a lot of Packers receivers. It's going to open up the passing game a little bit, especially in third down situations and in the red zone. So I think Hawkinson, I think you've got to take advantage of one of these two Iowa tight ends. And we'll see where Noah Fant goes later on in the mock draft. Number 13, I have the Miami Dolphins with Kyler Murray, quarterback out of Oklahoma. Kyler Murray, he is, like I said, until I see Kyler Murray going number 1 overall, until it actually gets announced, I'm not believing it. And I think the Dolphins, they get their quarterback. They get their franchise quarterback in Kyler Murray. I think he's got some potential, but can you build around him is the question. Number 14, I have the Atlanta Falcons with Cullen Farrell, defensive end of Clemson. And the Falcons, they need to draft winners. Ever since the Super Bowl 51 collapse, the Falcons have never been the same. They need to get back to form. And what better way to do that than drafting one part of a top priority, and number 2, a part of your top priority that knows how to win championships. Colin Farrell has won 2 championships with the Clemson Tigers football team. So he knows how to win. He knows how to perform. He has shined as the underdog in 2 different championship games. So this is kind of a motivational pick for the Falcons. I know that people aren't going to like it, but oh well, it's just a motivational pick. Number 15, I have the Washington Redskins with DK Metcalf, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. The Redskins, they traded for Case Keenum. They get a wide receiver not only for Case Keenum, but they'll probably invest in one of the quarterbacks in later rounds. It wouldn't surprise me if the Redskins, they went with Daniel Jones if he's still available in the second round. Kind of a spoiler knowing that Daniel Jones isn't going to be in this first round. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Redskins took Daniel Jones the next round if he was available when it came to their turn. But for now, go on the wide receiver to build up a target in your passing game. Because right now, Josh Dotson hasn't really cut it. Jordan Reed at the tight end's always injury prone. So they'll probably go tight end at some point in the draft. Wouldn't shock me at all. Number 16, I have the Carolina Panthers going with Cody Ford, offensive tackle of Oklahoma. I think the Panthers, they need to protect their offensive line. They need to build an offensive line to protect Cam Newton. And we saw the Panthers' O-line get exposed in Super Bowl 50 to the Denver Broncos. And ever since then, I feel like the Panthers' offensive line can get a little bit better. And I think Cody Ford, although it's kind of a little bit of a skeptical pick, I think Cody Ford, I think he's in the right position to get drafted in this particular spot. Although I think the Panthers could maybe go possibly a defensive end. Maybe they can go with Rashawn Gary, defensive end out of Michigan. Because Rashawn Gary, he keeps falling. He used to, at the beginning of this process, he was a top 5 pick. And ever since, every mock draft, he just keeps slipping a little bit. Keeps slipping away. So the Panthers would also go defensive end here. They could go with the next pick here. With number 17, the New York Giants going with Brian Burns, defensive end out of Florida State. Brian Burns, he's been outside of my first round for a couple mock drafts, but he's back in this one. A lot of people have some hype about him. And I can understand why. Even though Florida State wasn't that competitive lately, Florida State's defense, they always seem to build up these talented defensive players, the ones that people hype up a lot. And I think Brian Burns is one of them. Because Brian Burns seems to be moving up in a lot of mock drafts. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if he moved up in my 7.0 next week. Because a lot of things changed in the National Football League. So we'll see what the Giants do there. I feel like this is an ideal pick for the Giants because they got to build up on defense. Although they could maybe go with an offensive lineman if there's a good one still available to them that they're satisfied with. But I think this is the smart pick for the Giants in this particular position. Number 18 are the Minnesota Vikings with Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle at Clemson. The Minnesota Vikings defense, it was a good defense 2 years ago, but last year it really wasn't as good as what people were hoping for. And I think they can draft Christian Wilkins right here. Draft a winner, a proven winner in college, and build that Vikings defense back up. Turn it into the purple people eaters as what it deserves. What it ultimately wants to come back from the past. Either way, what is it called? The purple people eaters? Or yeah, just bring it back to where it was before. Bring back that legendary Vikings defense that was called, I'm guessing, the Purple People Eaters. At least I think that was called. I'm sorry to Vikings fans if I just completely got that incorrect. But what I'm saying is the Vikings, they need, their fans so desperately want that first Lombardi trophy. And defense wins you championships. Christian Wilkins won 2 championships with the Clemson Tigers. Number 19, I have the Tennessee Titans going with DeAndre Baker, cornerback out of Georgia. The Titans, they're kind of in an unpredictable spot. Nobody really knows what they're going to do. But I think they're going to improve their secondary with this pick and go with DeAndre Baker because he was a top 10 pick at the beginning of this process, but he's starting to slip down in my mock drafts. I think the Titans, they take advantage and pick up a steal in DeAndre Baker. Number 20, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers going with Devin Bush, the linebacker out of Michigan. There's 2 linebackers named Devin in this draft class, so it's been a little confusing at points. So Devin Bush, I think this is the Steelers' top need. I feel like they could go with Byron Murphy if he's still available, which he's still available in this mock draft. So maybe the pick can be Byron Murphy. But I think a linebacker is the top need because we're not sure if Ryan Shazier is going to come back and play anytime soon. So you might as well kind of invest in the linebacker position. But we'll see, though, with the Steelers. I'm kind of maybe skeptical. Maybe I should have put Byron Murphy in this 20th position. So I feel like that's where the Steelers could go because their secondary is their top need. But maybe they need more of a safety than they do a cornerback. Although this is probably a pick where I'm going to be completely wrong at, and the Steelers will probably go with the cornerback. The Steelers may trade up in the top 10 for Greedy Williams, but they don't really have maybe a lot of resources to play with necessarily. But I think Devin Bush would be an ideal pick for the Steelers, although, like I said, I could be wrong, and they could go with a corner. Number 21, I have the Seattle Seahawks going with Chris Lindstrom, offensive tackle out of Boston College. Now the Seahawks, they have really not improved on their offensive line. And I think the Seahawks, they need to improve the offensive line because I feel like they should have been doing that for the last 2 seasons. And last season they drafted a running back from Rashard Penny, someone who didn't, in my opinion, had no business being drafted in the first round, but they went with him. I mean, it worked out pretty well because the Seahawks, they were the leading rushing team in the NFL last season. And it's smart. Go with an offensive tackle because you know that you've led the league in rushing. Build an offensive line to assert your running game next season. Number 22, I have the Baltimore Ravens go with N'Keal Harry, wide receiver of Arizona State. The Baltimore Ravens wide receivers, they look pretty thin. They look pretty thin at the wide receiver position. And I think they go with N'Keal Harry to improve their receiving core. And I think it gives Lamar Jackson a target to throw to. Because N'Keal Harry, I think if it weren't for DK Metcalf and all the hype he's getting, I think he'd be getting the most hype as well. And I know that There was a mock that I saw earlier today that they had Andy Isabella, the wide receiver of UMass, go in the first round. I think that's a little bit too far of a stretch. I feel like Andy Isabella is going to go in the late second round or early third round. I don't see him being a first rounder. But if he is, that's pretty cool for the group of five represent. Although I think UMass is an independent team. But either way, non-Power 5 represent. But I think the Baltimore Ravens will go with N'Keal Harry because he's the most hyped receiver, minus DK Metcalf. And they have mixed feelings about DK Metcalf. Some think he's going to be a star in the league. Others think he may be a bust or he's all hype. He could be either one. But I think N'Keal Harry is the second best receiver in this draft class. But he'd get the most hype if it weren't for DK Metcalf. Number 23, I have the Houston Texans going with Andre Dillard, offensive tackle out of Washington State. And logical pick again, the Texans, they need to build an offensive line. Deshaun Watson, he was sacked a bunch. I don't remember the exact number. I believe he's been sacked 62 times since he's been the starting quarterback for the Texans. So that's kind of a alert to draft an offensive lineman. In fact, I think he was actually sacked 62 times just this season. So it's so a season like that, where your quarterback is sacked 62 times, you need to build an offensive line. You need to do it now. And Andre Dillard, he proved himself. He moved up to a first-round grade at the Combine. See, the NFL Combine changed a lot of people's perspectives of these prospects. Number 24, I have the Oakland Raiders going with Noah Fant, tight end of Iowa. The Iowa tight ends are going to get a lot of hype. In fact, I'll list off people that get a lot of hype, probably in the mock draft I do, probably the last one, about prospects that get a lot of hype. But the Raiders, they've moved on from Jared Cook, and I think they need a new number one tight end and a quarterback for Derek Carr to throw to. And yes, I've seen these bold predictions saying that the Raiders will trade up from number 4 to number 1 and draft Kyler Murray. They're going to draft Drew Lock, or they're going to draft Daniel Jones. I don't see the Raiders drafting quarterback. In fact, there is absolutely no way the Oakland Raiders will draft a quarterback. There's no way it's happening. Because Antonio Brown, right when the Raiders traded for Antonio Brown, Derek Carr, he responded with, or I think Antonio Brown tweeted business is booming, or Derek Carr tweeted it. It really doesn't matter. Either way, they had that Twitter interaction before even meeting each other in person as teammates for the first time. So you know that that's going to be chemistry. And the last thing you want to do is upset Antonio Brown, considering that you just traded for him. Although you kind of did get out of it with a big steal and only giving up maybe 2 mediocre picks. But either way, you just traded for someone like that. You traded for the best wide receiver in the National Football League. At least considerably, arguably. Last thing you want to do is upset him. And what's going to happen next with him at 27 might surprise a lot of people. Number 25 are the Philadelphia Eagles with Byron Murphy, cornerback out of Washington. I think the Eagles, they take advantage of a prospect like Byron Murphy that's continuing to fall. I think they look at their options, and I think they see that the secondary could use some work. Number 26, I have the Indianapolis Colts going with Jerry Tillery, defensive tackle out of Notre Dame. Now he's a part of the first round for the first time in this mock draft process. And I could see him maybe even moving up a little bit in that top 20. I feel like he's just that good for Notre Dame. Of course, people don't really look at it that much considering he came from Notre Dame. But it doesn't matter where they come from. And I think this could be a good fit for the Colts as they improve their defense. And the Colts, they have a bunch of money to spend around in cap space. They got a lot of cap space for things. And it's always best on the lookout for these second-year head coaches, because second-year head coaches, they have quite the history, at least as of late. I know it's a little bit of recency bias, but second-year coaches, they tend to be successful. And it could be Frank Reich the former Eagles offensive coordinator that was a part of that Super Bowl team. He could find himself in Miami this February. And I think Jerry Taylor, I think he's going to get maybe 4 or 5 sacks in his rookie season. I don't think he may necessarily be like an every snap kind of guy. He could be out there possibly. In fact, scratch that. I think he may get maybe 7 or 8 sacks in his rookie season if he was on the Colts. But I think Jerry Tillery, it wouldn't surprise me if a team really took a reach on him, like possibly the Vikings at number 18, or possibly even the Falcons at 14. It wouldn't surprise me at all if someone reached out on a reach. Number 27 are the Oakland Raiders, going with Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver of Oklahoma. Yes, the name is familiar. Yes, this is Antonio Brown's cousin. And the Raiders right now, not only are they building their team around them, not only are they taking advantage of these picks, but they're making Antonio Brown happy. Your current face of the franchise satisfied, and you've satisfied him with not drafting a quarterback in this first round. You found your Khalil Mack replacement. You have, in a way, found your Amari Cooper replacement in Antonio Brown, and you are getting his cousin Marquise Hollywood Brown for chemistry and for Antonio Brown's satisfaction. So right now the Raiders are doing an excellent job in this mock draft. I think they're actually winning this mock draft. Number 28 are the Los Angeles Chargers, going with Dalton Risner, offensive tackle at Kansas State. I think you need to build protection around Phillip Rivers because Phillip Rivers' time is running out. Although it could be possible that the Chargers, they could go with Daniel Jones here since he's still available at 28. But I really don't think so. I think you got to fit out your priorities first. You got to make a right fit with all your priorities straight. And I think offensive line is the top priority for the Chargers. I think they go with Dalton Risner here to build protection around Phillip Rivers, because I think Phillip Rivers, he still has about 2 or 3 seasons left in him. Number 29 are the Kansas City Chiefs, going with Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle at Clemson. And it's kind of a shame that Dexter Lawrence has fallen this far in the draft, because he was a top 10 pick until he failed that drug test before the college football playoff. And I think the Chiefs, they take advantage. They start rebuilding the defense because they made a lot of changes around that defensive side. Not only this offseason, from the last offseason as well. So, the Chiefs, they are starting their defense. They're building it back up again. Although some people would say, why even bother about defense when Pat Mahomes scores nearly every time he has the football? Because he doesn't. There are those rare times where the Chiefs don't score when Pat Mahomes has the football, believe it or not. And the Chiefs, they build up on that defense by going Dexter Lawrence, getting a major steal here at 29. Number 30 are the Green Bay Packers with Garrett Bradbury, the center at North Carolina State. Now, this is probably a strange pick as well, but Garrett Bradbury, I think he has earned a spot in the first round. A lot have said that he's a mid-second round, maybe early third rounder, but I think with the combine he had, I think he earned his way into the first round. And the Packers, they build offensive line to protect Aaron Rodgers. And you'll see a lot of these playoff teams, playoff caliber teams, that'll go with offensive line because they want to protect their franchise quarterbacks. Number 31 are the Los Angeles Rams, going with Rashawn Gary, defensive end out of Michigan. Yes, that is right. Rashawn Gary has fallen this far in the mock draft. And the reason why is because he's really been undervalued. He started off as a top 5 prospect, but he's fallen all the way down to 31. And the Rams, they get the biggest steal, I think, at least in this draft, before anything. Because a couple years ago, I thought Reuben Foster was a major steal for the 49ers. And obviously that hadn't turned out very well. But we will see what happens, though, with Rashawn Gary, if he happens to fall this far. Although I've heard some people say maybe the late teens, maybe the Giants at number 17 for Rashawn Gary. But I think 31 with Rashawn Gary, I feel like it could be respectable. although he's probably going to most likely end up towards that 17th slot. He could end up possibly in the 20s. But now that I think about it, I don't think it could be realistic if Rashawn Gary fell this far. But every single season, there is a prospect that everybody is hyped up on that's projected top 10 in every mock draft, but they end up falling to later rounds. They end up falling. They could fall to the second round, the third round. They could even go undrafted. And I think the Rashawn Gary, I think this ends here. The wait would end with the Rams, because the Rams need to build up on their defense. People aren't expecting Ndamukong Suh to return to the Rams. Although even if he does, I haven't really been checking up on NFL lately. I'm not sure if Ndamukong Suh is signed to, if they've re-signed Ndamukong Suh for another season or not yet. But either way, they need to draft somebody that is going to pair up with Aaron Donald. Because even if Ndamukong Suh does return for at least another season, he's getting up there in age. And Rashawn Gary, you got to kind of start off, get a new young pick. Let him learn under NFL veterans. Number 32, I have the New England Patriots going with Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle out of Mississippi State. And Jeffrey Simmons was a top 15 pick going into this mock draft process, but unfortunately, he tore his ACL and his draft stock has fallen. But with this pick, it could be possibly a 1-year plan. It could be the 1.5-year plan for Bill Belichick. Because Bill Belichick is one of the best coaches in the game. In fact, well, he is the best coach in the game right now. And possibly one of the best of all time. Because he knows what he's doing. And I think if he went with Jeffrey Simmons, I think the Patriots fans have to be patient. Because the same thing happened with Jalen Smith a couple years ago. Where he was a top 5 pick, but he tore his ACL in the bowl game, and he fell to the second round of the Cowboys. And it's been worth it so far for the Cowboys. And I see this being the same case for the New England Patriots with Jeffrey Simmons. Because he was a top 15 pick along with Montez Sweat when this draft process started. But since the ACL tear, his draft stock has just taken a huge plummet. But I think a pick right here at number 32 with the Patriots, it'd be worth it if they went with Jeffrey Simmons. So that is my NFL Mock Draft 6.0. Like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time with my NFL Mock Draft 7.0. We are getting much closer to the NFL Draft. It's going to be an exciting rest of the month. We'll see if anything else happens that's major that'll affect the NFL Draft process. And I'll see you next time.